repeat.
No problem.
Okay. Hi, Philip, and thank you for accepting to be interviewed by us and to call on the Bahraini government to release the political prisoners.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Okay. So, the head of the National Institute for Human Rights in Bahrain, Maria Khouri, had claimed that Bahrain is proceeding straightforward. She said, "Since Bassiouni's report, we haven't looked back." And she claimed that the new buildings in the central prison of Jau were designed to comply with the human rights. From your expertise, how do you comment on that? And to what extent do you think that the Bahraini prisons respect the prisoners, especially the political prisoners, and human rights?
Well, I think there's plenty of documentation to show that, in fact, Bahrain prisons do not respect human rights. And already as a result of her report, we're seeing commentary coming from other prisoners saying essentially, no, it's not good. There is cramped conditions. There are abuses still taking place. I mean, occasionally governments like to do this kind of thing. They get someone to go in and they try to show the best part of the prison and say that, see, everything's not so bad after all. And, this is a game that is being played by the Bahrain authorities. The reality is that the human rights abuses still happen in the prisons. There's a great deal of overcrowding. And our concern, of course, in the era of COVID-19 is that many of those prisoners will get sick unless something is done to reduce the overcrowding and to improve the sanitation and the access to water for all prisoners.
Okay. Tariq Al Hassan, the head of the security body in Bahrain, under which a number of political prisoners were killed. One of them is Zakaria Al Ashiri and Abdul Karim Fakhrawi. He was claiming that the political prisoners and all the prisoners in Bahrain are receiving all their rights, and that the security bodies in Bahrain are working to face the threat of COVID-19, while the political prisoners were still saying that they were denied their right to medical treatment, and the Bahrain Forum for Human Rights documented 300 violations related to denial of the right to medical treatment only last year. How do you interpret that, especially after the threat of COVID-19?
Well, I think it's very clear that political prisoners, people who have been convicted for nonviolent crimes, for often exercising their rights, these people should be released from prison. They should not face a potential death sentence because of a COVID-19 outbreak. And the reality is that COVID-19 is going to get into the prisons in Bahrain, and it's going to cause significant damage. The people there in the Bahrain prisons, these people have a real problem accessing quality health care. And many of them have underlying conditions that make them particularly vulnerable to serious illness with COVID-19. They could be have other health problems. They could be elderly. There's a number of different reasons why people are vulnerable to COVID-19 infection and a very serious case of COVID-related pneumonia, which often kills many people. So we have been calling, not just in Bahrain, but around the world, for governments to release political prisoners, to reduce the populations in their prisons, to reduce overcrowding, and to recognize that, if they don't act very quickly, that these prisons could become tinderboxes for COVID infection that will infect large populations of inmates and pretrial detainees.
Okay. So, as you mentioned, the underlying conditions, health conditions for some of the prisoners, I remember some of the opposition political figures, the elderly ones, and those with the high risk criteria because of their underlying conditions, like Hassan Mushaima, Abdul Jalil Asengez, and Abdul Wahab Khwaja, Nabil Rajab, and all of these human rights defenders and opposition figures. What if COVID-19 swept the prisons and one of these was infected? How um, how that would affect the image of the Bahraini government in front of the international community?
Well, I mean, obviously, the Bahrain government should already have in place some sort of mechanism to ensure that anybody who does get sick in prison can be promptly tested, can be isolated if they're found to be positive, and get the medical care they need, including being transferred to a hospital getting out of that prison, not relying on prison health facilities to try to treat a serious case. I think that if political prisoners of any sort in the Bahrain prisons get sick and die because COVID-19, because the government has not taken action to reduce overcrowding and to release political prisoners who, are these are not violent criminals. These are people who have exercised their rights. They deserve to be released. They don't deserve to be sentenced to sickness and possible death from COVID-19.
Some figures like Sheikh Ali Salman, those figures have role in starting social initiatives and community developments. These figures right now are behind bars. Shouldn't they be released, and shouldn't they be with the society helping to face such tough times?
As we've said all along, people who have been convicted of nonviolent crimes, who fall into various categories of risk because of pre-existing health conditions or age, people who, for instance, might be disabled or otherwise face vulnerability, these people should be all released. But speaking more broadly, and this isn't something that's important for the government of Bahrain to understand, the reality is that handling a public health emergency like COVID-19 requires the cooperation, the willing cooperation of the people. It can't be just ordered. It can't be just enforced by curfews. It can't be just enforced by various different national security orders. It has to be with the willing cooperation and engagement with the civilians of the people in the country, the citizens and any migrant workers as well. Of course, I mean, all groups of people are potentially at risk from COVID-19. And the problem is that the governments don't understand that they need the people as much as the people need the governments. In this case, people who have been working in community development, people who have been community leaders, these people are more important than ever because they're the sort of people who the government should be working with to ensure that communities know what is happening, that they get the information about the COVID-19 outbreak, that they know how to protect themselves, and that the information that is conveyed is coming from a trusted source, which is through the community leader. By throwing community leaders in prison rather than working with them on the COVID-19 response, the government of Bahrain is shooting itself in the foot. These people should be released. They should be allowed to help their communities, and they should be allowed to speak up and voice their opinions and act to protect the rights of their communities that they represent.
Okay. And what is your message to the King of Bahrain and the Bahraini government in these tough times? And what do you say to the Bahraini people?
Well, I would say to the government and the monarch, it's time to trust your people. It's time to let your people know what's happening, to speak out, to join organizations, to be able to assemble and work together with your people. Don't treat your people as under your feet. Treat your people as people who require your assistance, but who can also help you. I think that's very critical. And for the people of Bahrain, they should understand that there is continued international solidarity to support them in demanding their human rights. And Human Rights Watch and organizations like us will continue to be working shoulder to shoulder with them to ensure respect for human rights and democracy in Bahrain.
Okay. Phil Robertson, the Deputy Director of Human Rights Watch in South Asia. Thank you very much for conducting this interview, and thank you for supporting the Bahraini people through your work.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.